Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting edition of the Sarah Stevenson Tuesday Morning Forum. My name is Winston Robinson. I am your facilitator today, alongside co-facilitators, Ms. Laura McClady, Mrs. Mary Johnson, Ms. Nathalie McElrath, Ms. Jackie Edwards Walton, Ms. Aretha Sherrill, our chaplain, was not here today, Mr. Steve Johnston, our website editor and archivist, Mr. Shay Abdullah, and our house musician, Dr. Thomas. Our forum runs from 8:30 to 9:45, at which we will pause and have questions from the audience. Questions will be received in the order your hand was raised and accounted for. We always begin with a prayer from our chaplain, who is not here today. Wait a minute, come on now. Come on now, we better have a prayer from the county commissioner. Wait a minute, this is an honor and a privilege. Please tell everybody who you are and what this means before you get into your prayer. This is history, but Sarah Stevenson.
Stop, look. I'm here because God put me here, because there's no way that a person who's run for office for the second time only in her life, now I managed campaigns and all that, but ran, and on my second time, I beat an incumbent of 13 years with $3,000 in bank. All right. So that's why I'm praying this morning, because I want to give thanks. So if you would please, just bow your head. By the way, my name is Yvette Townsend Ingram. I am your Board of County Commissioner at Large elect. I am on your ballot, but running unopposed. And so I praise God for that. And with that, we'll go to prayer. Go to God in prayer. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we rise this morning to give you thanks, oh God, in all things, for letting us see another day, because there are so many who did not make it, oh God, and who are now greeting you on the other side. So for being awake and having the activity of our limbs and arms and able to even be in the room or streaming or wherever you are, if you are on this side of the soil, we say thank you, Father. Father God, we give you glory and honor that you have control over all things, oh God. And you said, oh God, your yoke is easy and your burden is light. So we ask, oh God, that you would help us to cast our cares on you, Father. That as we are in this battle, understanding that it's not a physical battle, but it's spiritual warfare, oh God. So God, we ask that you would be with us, that you would gird our minds, our hearts, our emotions, oh God. Help us to keep them intact, oh God. We pray only, oh God, that your people, oh God, would be blessed with the people in office who would serve their interests and your interests, Father, and what you put us here to do. So, Father, we ask for your protection. You know all things, oh God, before we could even think about it. You know what's going to happen. So, God, we thank you in advance. We ask for your protection. We ask for your grace and your mercy, and we ask for your guidance. These and all blessings we ask in the name that is most powerful. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Commissioner Townsend Ingram. Our guests today are candidates and incumbent and candidates for House District 104, Mr. Brandon Lofton, and 105 is Nicole Sidman. Now, this is a nonpartisan forum. We invited everybody, however, who showed up. We will allow them to present. How much time would you say, Ms. Nathalie?
5 minutes.
5 minutes before we open the floor to questions. Following the presentation, we will go to questions. We'll take questions from the audience. And again, please raise your hand. We will record those, the order in which your hand was raised, and then we will go to you. We have a timekeeper, Ms. Nathalie McElrath, and who will give you signals when that time is met. Without further ado, Mr. Brandon Lofton, Ms. Nicole Sidman.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. So my name is Brandon Lofton. It is my honor to serve you in the North Carolina House. I represent House District 104. This is my third term. I'm running for my fourth term in the North Carolina House. I am a husband, a father, a lawyer, Started my legal career working with Julius Chambers at Ferguson Stein Chambers before then went on to be a public finance attorney. So what that really means is that I care a lot about fairness and opportunity, but I'm mindful about how our financial decisions impact opportunities in our state. I want to talk to you briefly about public schools in North Carolina. So I have two boys. My younger son, Caleb, is in his junior year of high school. During his freshman year of high school, spring semester, his math teacher quit, and his school could not hire a replacement. So that meant for the entire semester, my son sat in a room with his classmates and watched on a Zoom screen the teacher from across the hall who would come over for the last 10 minutes of class to see if anyone had any questions. So my wife and I called the school concerned to see what we could do to get him some support. The assistant principal told us that he himself was covering several classes of math and asked if we knew anyone interested in becoming a math teacher to send them his way. I visited the school as part of the Take a Legislator to School Day, talked with the principal. He took me to a class with seniors. Every last one of those seniors over the previous 3-4 years had at least one class where they did not have a teacher. That year we lost 10,000 teachers across the state, which was the highest in decades. And yet I had to go to Raleigh and vote on a budget that year in 2023 where we spent more money on private school vouchers than we did on teacher raises. In fact, a few months ago, we passed House Bill HB 10, which the governor thankfully vetoed, but if that gets overridden, we will this fiscal year spend 4 times as much money on private school vouchers as we will spend on teacher raises. That money will be $541 million for private school vouchers compared to $130 million for public school raises. And it builds in automatic increases that will reach $800 million by 2032. So for me, the situation facing our children, facing our state, it's an emergency, and we need to do everything we can to help support our public schools. Another thing I just want to flag for you is last year, the fiscal year that just ended on June 30th, we actually brought in $224 million less in tax revenue, $224 million less in tax revenue than we did before. This is despite the fact that we're the 3rd fastest growing state in the nation. We're going to pass Georgia and Ohio in a few years. So we have more people moving here, less tax revenue, and the situation we're already not keeping up and funding our public schools. So in my mind, we have a serious situation that we need to have serious leadership to address, and the only way we can do that is by breaking the supermajority, getting Josh Stein in as governor, being able to push forward our priorities, which includes our children and the future of our state. And then finally, you all probably heard the talking point the last few years that North Carolina has been the #1 state in the nation for business. We no longer are the #1 state in the nation for business. Virginia has passed us. The #1 reason given by MSNBC was their investment in public schools. The warning given to us when we used to be #1, the thing that could threaten, besides lack of funding for public schools, was our political climate. We were warned about the extreme political climate in North Carolina. And right now on our ballot, we have some very extreme candidates running to be our governor, our superintendent of public schools, and again, we have an extreme legislature. So the only way to protect the future growth of our state and our children is by bringing more balance in our legislature and investing in our future. And I appreciate your support and look forward to answering questions.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's lovely to be with you all. My name is Nicole Sidman. I'm a first-time candidate, so I want to introduce myself to y'all a little bit. I am a lawyer and a teacher. I'm a former PTA president, a mom of 2, and have been working in the community for the last close to decades that I've been in Charlotte. I'm the director of congregational life at my faith house, and I work in the interfaith community and do a lot of work with the unhoused, with refugee organizations, and really trying to work across differences and bringing people together. So that's something that is really my passion and something that I love to do. I had intended to just spend my life in public service, but when I learned about some of the gerrymandering and things that have been happening in North Carolina, I started looking closer at the General Assembly and just trying to figure out what I could do, because what I was finding is that as I worked closer to organizations, that there was sort of less and less ways to help because the funding wasn't there, the volunteers weren't there, and the infrastructure wasn't there. And so and I, just as an aside, currently I'm sitting beside my current representative, Brandon Lofton. Clearly I did not primary him. But what happened was, Tricia Cotham, this is really.
Is yours or?
No, it's all.
Yeah, sorry, all right. Is it all right? Okay, sorry, it's just reverberating weirdly to me. So what happened was, Brandon talked a lot about the supermajority and how important it is to break the supermajority. This is a room full of very educated people, so I know y'all know about Tricia Cotham, but I'll just say for people who may be watching and don't know, Tricia Cotham ran as a Democrat. She promised a lot of things to a lot of people, took a lot of their time, treasure, and trust. And then within 3 weeks of taking office, winning a safe Democratic seat, she flipped to Republican. And by doing that, she was able to join with the Republicans to override Governor Cooper's vetoes on many of the bills that Brandon has spoken about. And that is really what inspired me to look at what we could do to make sure North Carolina stay on the right path. The next thing that happened is that she was rewarded with a very gerrymandered district. And that district went from where she currently resides in 112, which was a strongly Democratic district, to this new House District 105, which is leaning Republican, leaning +5. It is one of the strangest looking districts you could find. It begins up at Mint Hill, where she lives, and goes all the way down through Matthews to South Charlotte, down to what is much of Representative Lofton's current District 104, which is where I live. So when I found out that her district had been drawn to include my neighborhood, I really thought long and hard about what I could do to make sure that she was not able to be rewarded for in that way. And so I looked deeply into the opportunities and decided to run for office, because I think it is really important that we break the supermajority, because without that, we don't have democracy in Raleigh. We have a duly elected Democratic governor who is constantly having his will overridden by this current representative and the GOP there. So that's really what inspired me to run. I am inspired by helping people find their passion and finding ways to serve, especially in ways to help protect our public schools and our bodily autonomy and safety, in addition to the reasons why Representative Lofton talked about how our state is becoming number 2 for business. I talk a lot about how all of these things are economic issues. If we don't have good public schools, if we don't have a good environment where people feel safe and welcomed, people aren't going to want to move here, people aren't going to want to move their companies here, and people aren't going to follow companies here. So I think all of these things are really interactive, and we have to look at it as a holistic picture and not sort of bifurcate these social issues and economic issues, because at the end of the day, a robust, healthy, welcoming North Carolina is good for everybody. So I look forward to your questions and to figuring out how to use this microphone. And again, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. We have a question from Ms. Jackie Edwards-Walton.
Good morning. Thank you so much for coming. Both of you are attorneys, and you've been involved with education. Can you talk a little bit about, and folk will, by the way, will continue to move to North Carolina, I think. But can you talk a little bit about how all that's going on right now with Leandra and the education, and how we have to move forward?
So I think everyone in the room is familiar with the Leandra litigation and how long that's been going on, and how our Supreme Court ruled that every child in North Carolina, that our Constitution entitles every child in North Carolina to a sound basic education, and that it's the state legislature's responsibility to provide that sound basic education. And then the Supreme Court ruled that North Carolina was failing to provide that sound basic education. And they actually entered into a consent order plan to actually move forward and help invest in our kids. In the first couple of years, that investment would have cost $1.7 billion. The legislature refused to comply with that court order. So for years, our legislature has sat under a court order for failing to invest in our children. In other words, we have done such a poor job with investing in our children that it's a violation of their constitutional rights, and the legislature has just simply flatly refused to comply with this court order. So now that is being reconsidered in our courts. In the meantime, the legislature has chosen to divert more money, as I mentioned earlier, into private school vouchers. So instead of using that money to invest in our children, it's actually diverting that money into private school vouchers. So we have a situation in our state right now where we have, again, the teacher shortage, too many children who don't have teachers in their classrooms. And it's not just the teachers, it's bus drivers. I've talked to parents who have to organize carpools because they don't have enough bus drivers to get their kids home from school on time. It's nurses, it's psychologists, it's everything that goes into supporting our children. And the fact is, we shouldn't have to have the courts tell us what we already know, which is that we need to invest in our children. So I think that's the long and short of it, is that we're in violation of the constitutional obligation to provide each child a sound basic education, and our state has refused to comply with it. And I think the only thing that's going to force the state to comply with it is just a change in the leadership in our legislature.
I don't have anything to add. I just want to say the story that Representative Lofton has told us just highlights how important our courts are, and to make sure that we are really paying attention to who's getting elected as judges, because that's where a lot of these decisions are being made and then changed. And so it's really just important that we focus also on who our judges are.
Yeah, can I add something to that point about our courts? So a couple of things happened. Obviously, everyone knows that Chief Justice Sherry Beasley lost her race by 401 votes, which obviously changed the makeup of our Supreme Court. Another thing that happened was the legislature. So, we're all familiar with the concept of separation of powers. So the legislature has passed a number of bills taking power away from the governor. They also have taken away the independence, or threatened the independence of courts. By doing a couple of things. One, they removed public funding for judicial candidates. Two, they made judicial races partisan. So now when you run for office as a judge, you're running with a D or R by your name. The first year I was elected, 2018, was the first year that went into effect. So we actually had a situation that year where our most highly rated judge, rated by lawyers in town, lost his election simply because they drew him into a Republican district and put a D by his name. So the independence of our courts, to Nicole's point, is very critical in terms of the future of our state.
All right, Mr. Combs.
With some reasonable background in media marketing and public relations and information, it seems to befuddle me that the Democratic Party only seems to make these issues extremely critical during election times. And my question is, what are your sentiments in regards to the Democratic Party, even during off-year elections, non-election years, on massive media campaign that makes all of these issues matters of public record, public information, and for the public to be able to make a decision, as well as those folk who are coming into North Carolina who would make a difference in their decisions to come here if they knew the total political climate. In short, the Democratic Party seems a bit on the impotent side.
Shots fired.
All right, so first, full disclosure or disclaimer, I'm not in marketing. I'm not, if any of you, please do go to my social media page, follow me on Instagram or Facebook or even Twitter. You probably would have similar criticism of me and my social media presence. I think that is a real issue. It is something that we're working on, obviously, all throughout the year. You can go and see all the bills that we have filed to fully fund the Andrews, the Working Families Act, to give reinstated child tax credit. There are all kinds of things that we're fighting for all during the year, multiple years, to try to help our kids. But I'll say this. The other side has, my understanding, as limited as it is, of marketing is repetition matters. And it's not just when I say something or the Democrats say something, it's whether we have partners and others in the community who are repeating it. The other side has that repetition. They have outside groups. They have seem to be grassroots echoing those same talking points and those same positions. So you're hearing it a lot from a lot of different people, not just from Republican candidates. On the Democratic side, you do have Democratic candidates saying these things. I don't think we have the same ecosystem of other groups saying the same thing and drawing the same attention. I think on the education front, the teachers in this state have carried a lot with raising this issue. They've been up to Raleigh several times with the Red for Ed Day, thousands of teachers. And, obviously we as Democratic elected officials have tried to amplify that as well. But outside of teachers and elected officials, there really hasn't been that same voice for our kids. What you see is more parent, and what I think the critical voice missing there is the parents. The parents have been, to the extent you've heard from parents, you've heard them angry at the school board or angry at the county commission, and they're being drawn to these culture wars, but you're not seeing any parental anger directed at us in Raleigh. We need the parents' voice, frankly, and we need them in Raleigh to hold us accountable, not direct that attention at the school board or the county commission, because frankly, the county commission is doing the state's job. They're spending a good portion of their budget funding things that we're supposed to fund. And the parents, we need the parents' voice in Raleigh to help amplify that. So I agree with your point, and I welcome any help with trying to do a better job with the social media and everything else. But I do think the key is going to be having others supporting and raising that voice. And for education, I think it's got to be the parents as well.
Yeah, I think that it's so important that we talk about these issues all year round. And I also think that it's hard to get people to want to talk about these issues all year round. I think what happens is we hit a point of, around election season where everybody's paying attention, and then people kind of go about their daily lives. And I think the idea of, having these sort of, the Republicans are really good at slogans and pithy sayings, and the Democrats are really good at over-explaining things. And so I think what happens is that we really want to dig into the policy of it, and we really want to get it right. And by the time we've had those conversations, we lose a lot of people. So I think you're right, and I think being in the community more, having those conversations, and really sharing our stories. I'm a community organizer by trade, and I believe that the most important thing we can do is share our stories. So when we hear stories like Representative Lofton's son, you can't deny the truth of that story, of that child trying to learn math by himself. And then you have to say, okay, what can we do about it? So I think that's really the key, is just really being together to hear what we are all experiencing, and then, okay, what can we do? And if the answer is getting parents up to Raleigh and having not just the teachers Red for Ed, but a parent day. I've been to Raleigh and I've had legislatures hide from me, literally, not this one obviously, but their LAs, their legislative assistants say, oh, they're not here today, and then you turn around and they're literally hiding in a corner. So holding people accountable for that, when you go to Raleigh, you are there to serve the people, whether they're people who voted for you or not, whether they're people who agree with you or not. And if we have legislators who are not showing up in their communities, not seeing their constituents when they come up to them, we have to amplify that, and we have to hold those people accountable.
Commissioner Townsend Ingram, before you go to your question, this is a point of privilege. Judge Matt Newton has to go, and he has an important announcement.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Judge Matt Newton. They call me Judge Man Bun, by the way, so you can do that if you want. I just wanted to echo a point that I think Brandon and Nicole just covered so eloquently. By the way, it's early vote right now. When you go out to the polls, please vote top of the ticket all the way through. We have a number of ballot initiatives, by the way, at the bottom of the ticket. So bond initiatives, also a constitutional amendment for our consideration. Don't forget those. But at the same time, certainly there are many, many important races that have tremendous consequences, particularly at the top of the ticket. But then we also have judicial races down towards the bottom. And certainly here in Mecklenburg County, I think we're okay. All of my colleagues who are running, I'm not running this year. I will be in 2 years, and I would appreciate your support then, of course, but all of my colleagues that are running this year are running unopposed. However, that's not the case for Court of Appeals and for State Supreme Court. We have very competitive races there. So please spread the word when people go vote. Please encourage them not to experience that voter fatigue and make sure that they get through the entirety of the ballot. Thank you so much, and thank you for the time.
Judges are coming from everywhere. Come on, we got another.
Thank you, Matt. So good morning, everyone. I'm Shantae Burke here. I know I can't stay long. I have to get to court myself, but I think Judge Newton says it best all the time. But it's good to be here. I'm out of breath because I was running up here. It's good to be here with you. I am on your ballot. I am blessed to be unopposed this go round. It feels so good to do that. But nonetheless, I'm still out here at the polls here and there, showing my face, saying hello, saying thank you for just getting out to vote, because it's not just about me. So many others on the ballot that we need to pay attention to. And so one of the main things, and I know everyone here already knows that, but for those who may be watching or even those I meet at the polls, one of the things I always tell them is just make sure that you go all the way to the end of the ballot. Don't worry, don't focus just on the top, because we need the top, but we need everything too that follows all the way to the end, like the bonds and the amendment to the Constitution. So we want to make sure that we pay attention to that, but like Judge Newton has already said, there are plenty of our colleagues that wanted to be here but cannot. Sometimes court starts at 8:30 for some of them. For others like us, it starts at 9. So they do send their regards. But just thank y'all for always thinking of us, and as soon as we can, we will try to stop by. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Judge Burke. Hey, thank you, Commissioner, for your grace. Please continue with your question.
Now, I just want to thank our judges for being here. I know these two judges personally, and I have benefited and learned from their wisdom, from their running. They have been friends. They have been, people who I can trust. You want to be able to trust your judges, right? So I really do appreciate them for that and for being here. I'm also running unopposed, but I have been out in these streets every day trying to ensure that all Democrats, and yes, I'm being partisan, this is a nonpartisan event, but I am partisan, so trying to make sure that side of the ballot, from the top to the bottom, that people are elected. Because I can't do my job effectively as a first-time commissioner without every single one of those individuals. And I think that is also key year-round, explaining to people the importance. I call it explaining to them the price, what that has to do with the price of eggs. That's my little phrase, right? So in piggybacking off of what Mr. Kuntz said, I think that because the Democratic umbrella is so large, and we're fighting for so many rights for so many people, a lot gets lost in translation, and that's where they lose us on the details. With regard to Leandro, I think in my opinion, what I'm hearing people say, if they say anything, because there is so much apathy among voters, and we're seeing it, of course, in this election. We pull out all the stops trying to get people to the polls, particularly black voters out to the polls. And we're working and we're starting to see the fruits, but it gets discouraging when you know you've done everything you can and you still aren't seeing results. So I think what I'm hearing and what I would love to see myself is a pivot. If Leandro, we've been trying to get Leandro done for, what, a decade? Or more? Is there a way that we can pivot, have a plan B that we enforce? Because, the Democrats, I'm sorry, we are more qualified than the Republican candidates that I'm seeing being put forward. Definitely more qualified. So is there a plan to pivot? Surely we're not the only state who has gone through this. Can we look at models of others? Can we pivot and do something different? While we're still working on Leandro, we need to have a plan B, because in the meantime, our students are going through not having teachers, not getting the education they need, not meeting reading scores. All of those things are happening.
Okay, that's it, let them answer, okay, sorry.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I think the main point, the bottom line is our kids need highly qualified teachers in the classroom. They need nurses, they need psychologists, they need support staff, they need bus drivers. Whether it's through Leandro litigation or not, it just has to be a part of our budget process. It's going to be an ongoing fight. You will hear from the other side all kinds of theories about how schools should work and efficiency arguments and competition arguments and everything else, but it's fairly simple. You cannot have great schools without great teachers. And if our teachers are leaving the classroom and telling us that we're not paying them enough, then we need to listen to that. And there's no way around that. You cannot have great schools without great teachers, and that has to be a fight. It has to be a fight for our kids, and it has to be a fight for the future of our state.
Yeah, I think we need to clarify, this is not an argument of two different sides about how to have the best public schools. This is an argument about one side who wants to improve the public schools and another side who truly wants to dismantle the public schools. And I think that as long as that's the fight we're fighting, getting the funding is obviously the goal, but we've got to fight that fight first, which is to explain why we need our public schools and why these vouchers, for example, are not a good substitute for a good public school. And as long as we're taking all that money out, we can't really have the conversations that you're talking about. And to your point, again, and you made this point too, we need to help explain to people why Mecklenburg County is paying for things that the state should be paying for and how that impacts all of the people who live here. As a side note, I just learned from Justice Allison Riggs, that Leandro is a lawyer now. He was the child it was named in the case, and it's been so long. He's gone from a school child to he's now a practicing lawyer. So that shows you how long we've been fighting this fight.
Okay, we've been talking about Leandro for years. As you just said, he's an attorney now. Can this case be taken to the Supreme Court? Why does North Carolina have this type of power if it's a court order? Can it be taken to the Supreme Court?
It's a state constitutional issue, and so that's why it's controlled by the state Supreme Court. But I guess I just want to, to your point, pivot from talking about it as a case to talking about it as a value and the funding. If there was no Leandro court decision, there still would be the imperative that we need to fund our public schools and put teachers in the classroom. That's just bottom line, regardless of litigation, that's what we need to do. So it's a values judgment, and it's an imperative for the future of our state, regardless of the positioning of the court lawsuit, the legislative decision and priority, that's only going to be impacted by who's actually sitting in those seats, pressing those red or green buttons.
All right, Ms. Jan. And after Ms. Jan, we have Mr. Pfeiffer, Cameron, and Ken.
Is it on? There we go.
Just in comments on the school, maybe you all know this, but Saturday, November 2nd, 4 to 6, there is a school rally. McDims, please join us for a reception with champions of public education. It's 4 to 6. It's at Elise Dashu's home. There will be Elise, Jennifer De La Hara, Patricia Ever, David Margaret, a whole group, Mary McCrory, Carol Sawyer, Special guest Mo Green, candidate superintendent of public education. Rep Wesley Harris, candidate Rachel Hunt, superintendent governor. So there's power in the people, and that's, a lot of these are parents. So let's try to make a big voice. Just an addendum to that, my grandson taught at Vance after he did Teach America, and the teachers' staff was so low that he was teaching science, which wasn't his background, but it worked. But he didn't have any breaks, anything else, so he left teaching. At least he's working with teachers now, but that's what's happening to our teachers. Thanks.
All right, we have Mr. Pfeiffer.
Thank you for coming. I have if my facts are incorrect, correct me. There's 71 Republicans and 49 Democrats in the House, is that correct? The Constitution says 3/5 of those present and voting are required to override a veto. Right now, the first step to get fairness in North Carolina is to break that supermajority. How many votes do Democrats need at a minimum, and how many competitive districts are there that'll swing the balance?
We need one. We need to flip my seat, because when Tricia Cotham was elected as a Democrat, they didn't have a supermajority. So when they flipped it, and my House seat is the only competitive House seat in Mecklenburg County other than North Mac. But because of the gerrymandering, we have a number of unopposed Democrats because they've gerrymandered it so much. And obviously Brandon has a race and he has an opponent, and he should, we need to support Brandon and make sure we're getting out vote for Brandon, and he's a wonderful representative. But as long as he retains his seat and I flip this seat, we can uphold the veto.
So I'm supposed to wait until after November the 5th to see if you won or lost. And your race is the only race that matters as to whether or not you break the supermajority.
No, you're supposed to work really hard between now and November 5th to make sure. But yes.
I know.
Mr. Pfeiffer, we don't debate. I let you slide one in, but we can come back to you with another question. Cameron?
Dovetailing with that, let's say Josh Stein becomes governor, you break the supermajority, right? Even if we flip your seat and we flip a couple others, we flip the Senate, you're gonna have narrow margins. Yeah. What are your priorities in those budget negotiations? I know Representative Lofton been through this before, where we went forever without a budget. What are some of your red lines that you would not cross over for in these negotiations?
Yeah.
So yeah, let me answer that by just describing to you 2019. So we broke the supermajority in 2018 when I was elected. I beat a Republican incumbent. 5 other people beat theirs as well. So we had a large class of Democrats who flipped their seats, gave Governor Cooper's veto power. We came in. Budget season came around. The way the legislature works, in the House in particular, it's 120 people. So the number one question you have to ask yourself when you get there is, why should anybody care what I think? You can have this idea that you're going to go in there and win everybody over by the strength of your intellect and your charm and your persuasiveness. But the fact is, the numbers are the numbers. So when it comes to budget negotiations, the margin by which we break the supermajority matters. If we only have 1 or 2 people, and in my year, I can't remember what the margin was, we have maybe 4 or 5, the strategy will be to try to peel people off, particularly with budget. So they'll come and they'll say, hey, Representative Lofton, how would you like to have a new road built in your district? Or how would you like to have a new government building, or whatever it is that you can brag to your constituents and say that you got. All you have to do is commit to vote for this budget. So what they'll try to do, we saw, they promised to move DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles headquarters, to 3 different Democratic districts because they were shopping around trying to get a Democrat to commit to break and vote with them on their budget. So you have a situation where you would be asked to essentially sell out public schools, sell out Medicaid expansion, sell out things that are critical to our state just so you can get some individual projects or DMV headquarters or what have you in your district. That will repeat itself this go-round when we break the supermajority again. So what ends up happening is we have to have a lot of conversations to try to hold everyone together, because the only strength and the only way you actually get anything substantive that's actually going to move the needle on these priorities, to your point, education being one of them, is if we actually bring the governor to the table and allow the governor to negotiate the big issues. And that's what we did. We held, and every day, to your point, in terms of breaking the supermajority, it's those present and voting. So that meant, for my first term, every day, I'd be in Raleigh, they'd gavel us in, the speaker would look around to see who's there, gavel us out. We sat there in Raleigh doing nothing other than showing up and holding that veto standoff for months while we try to get the governor to the table to be able to negotiate Medicaid expansion. That was the big thing we were fighting for that year. And that only ended when they did that surprise vote, which I was on the floor for in September. So all the way from July through September, all the things I missed in my kids' lives, being away from work, my family was fighting for Medicaid expansion and fighting for our top priorities and trying to do something substantive. When you're in the minority, you do not have power. You don't have the power to move your agenda forward. You have the power to draw the line in the sand on extreme legislation. And if you hold together, you have enough margin where they can't peel people off of promising projects, you can get larger priorities done, which we were able to eventually get Medicaid expanded. It took too long, but we were able to get it. That's what it was like for me serving in that minority, where there was a lot of pain in terms of the standoffs to show up and then try to peel people off. And then, but I can tell you, even that experience was better and preferable to what happened last year, where once Tricia flipped, then they just ignored us and just ran everything through. Repealing pistol permitting laws, repealing abortion protection, everything else. So that's what it's going to look like until there's an actual flip in the majority. So that's just a preview of what my experience has been like.
Why am I doing this now? Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Representative Lofton when I was considering running, and we talked a lot about that. And among the other really great pieces of advice he gave me, one was always buy trip insurance, because you never know what your schedule is going to be, because you really are at the mercy of the majority. And one thing that we've seen is really heroic members showing up sick, showing up through treatments, because they know that every single vote needs to be in that chamber. So really the goal is to bring balance to Raleigh. That's not the way democracy is supposed to work. There's supposed to be a robust conversation. So that's really the goal.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what kind of insurance. Gotcha, okay.
Mr. Combs?
On the budget issue, I always find it interesting. The legislature has given local communities what's called the local supplement authority. And from my observations here locally, it always comes down to, even under Democrat control, is that we don't want to be considered the tax commission. And as a result, it's more expedient for them to kick the can up to Raleigh when it comes to the issues of educational funding. What is your concern or interest or thoughts along the lines of Mecklenburg County? You have the authority of local supplement. You just have not had the intestinal fortitude to raise your taxes a half cent or 1% or whatever, to give these teachers adequate funding so that they can have teachers in classrooms.
So I'm really glad you asked this question, because I think this is something we don't think about or talk about enough. And I'll go back to 2019, that first budget standoff that we were in. Because we did not adopt the budget that year, we did not have teacher raises. But the county did step in. The county did increase its supplement that year. I think Mecklenburg County did, Guilford County did, Durham, and Wake. So you have a situation where, because the state's not doing this job, the counties are increasing their supplements, and more rural counties that have lower property tax base are not able to keep up. So it's increasing that urban-rural divide. The other thing that's happening is when the state pays for something, you have to look at the revenue source. So the state draws its money from income taxes and corporate income taxes, but of course we're eliminating corporate income tax, so that's going away. We're also lowering your personal income tax, which everyone obviously enjoys paying lower taxes, but what ends up happening is when the state is not doing its job, it's actually shifting that tax burden down to the county. So when the county is paying for that supplement and increasing it, which they did in 2019, and I think they did have a property tax increase most recently, the county's source of revenue is property tax. So what you're doing is you're shifting that tax burden off of a statewide income tax onto the local county property tax. The difference between income tax and property tax, of course, is you pay income tax on money you make. Your property taxes could go up whether you've made money, lost money, retired, fixed income, no matter what. So an affordability issue for a place like Charlotte, that's huge. So it's shifting that burden down to us. It's increasing our affordability crisis we have here in Mecklenburg County, and it's increasing the urban-rural divide. I grew up in East North Carolina. We don't have the property tax base to compete with Mecklenburg County. So if we want to end up like other states, we see these huge divides between the funding of schools based on where the property tax is the highest. That's actually where we're being pushed to, because Mecklenburg County, our county commission, is not going to let, they're going to do everything they can to help support our schools, but it's going to increase that burden on property tax. And it's not just the schools, it's the court system as well. So, and that impacts the speed in which we can have trials. Those things are supposed to be funded by the state. And the extent to which the county's paying for it, again, it's money the county's not spending on health, on parks and rec, other things that the county's supposed to be spending money on because they're paying our responsibility. So the things I've always said are, we need parents to raise their voice. We also need our county commissions, not just here, but around the state, to raise their voice, to send us a bill for the things they're paying for that the state's supposed to be paying for, to really draw some visibility to that. Now, you know, whether that's a smart political move in terms of allocations from the budget, that's another thing, but I think we need to have that awareness around that. So I appreciate you answering or asking that question.
I have a question. So just kind of to the point you made, it seems like before we get to the voting and the policy level, there's a sentiment between the urban areas of North Carolina, and the eastern North Carolina, western North Carolina. How can we use innovation to tether those business opportunities that organizations come to North Carolina for, that often leave our rural areas on the outskirts looking like we're left out of this? So what innovative ideas or initiatives can we invoke to make sure that the state benefits as a whole instead of these isolated metropolis areas?
Yeah, so this is another huge issue. So I mentioned earlier that North Carolina is the third fastest growing state in the country. Again, we're going to pass Ohio and Georgia here in, I think, by 2030. But that growth, of course, is not even. You know, to your point, that growth is mostly concentrated in your urban areas. It's Wake County, Mecklenburg County, Guilford County, Durham. There are many counties in this state that are losing population, that people are leaving. And that's, to your point, has to do with economic opportunities as well. We offer tax incentives and grants and property tax abatements and other things to try to attract businesses to those areas. But frankly, you have to be, it's not enough to offer money to companies to want to relocate somewhere. You have to be a place where people want to live, where businesses can operate well. So that means protecting the quality of life. That means a highly educated workforce. That means access to transportation infrastructure. All those things have to be in place in order for these communities to thrive. So In order to do that, in addition to some of the incentives we have, we need investments in our transportation infrastructure and education. If you don't have a robust education system, and not just K-12, we didn't talk about the community college system, which is critical for, to your point, for economic development, to creating that workforce. That's what it's going to take, that kind of investment, in order to incentivize more companies and enable them to locate to other parts of the state. So if we had better connected communities, broadband infrastructure, community college investments, those are the types of things that enable other communities to thrive. That would be beneficial for our state as a whole. It'd be beneficial for us in Mecklenburg County if people could live and work in other areas and relieve some of the background as well.
So we're going to keep questions to 30 seconds. We're going to ask answers to be a minute less. Mr. Pfeiffer.
This is candidate Sidman. Now, your race is critical. What are you finding will be the 1, 2, or 3 key issues that'll get voters to vote for you and not for her?
Well, if I absolutely knew the answer to that, I would be guaranteed a victory, but I can tell you the conversations I'm having at the door. And I have knocked, my campaign has knocked thousands and thousands of doors, and I've personally knocked over 1,000 doors. So I'm talking to people what they care about. One of the things they care deeply about is voter suppression and gerrymandering. And to be clear, gerrymandering is voter suppression. So when I talk to people about this new district that was drawn as a benefit for someone who is, legislating totally different than she ran, that's something they care about, because regardless of your politics, that's not democracy. They're also very concerned about the schools. Mecklenburg County schools are top of mind of, I think, all districts, and so that's something we talk a lot about. And then reproductive rights and health is really top of their mind too, bodily autonomy, and making sure that they are safe, their families are safe, and that they get the health care they need.
Okay, thank you, Representative Brandon Lofton, for bringing that information in. I always learn something when I come here, but I think I know the answer to this. What's the best way that citizens can combat their representative from being peeled off by the other side?
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I think, communicating with your representative, emails, phone calls. Our delegation typically has, the town halls, and so coming to those and holding us accountable. But I will tell you, we'll all be working to hold each other accountable. I don't think you'll have to worry about this delegation. And frankly, I think as a caucus, I think we didn't have too much of that go on when we had the standoff. That's why we had the standoff. So I think we'll be prepared. It's a problem. It's a good problem to have. It's better than being in the superminority.
Ms. Ivory, you have a question? We have any other questions? I got plenty. I can jump in mine. All right. Okay. Let's talk about. So one thing we know we have the data on is the disparity in funding for HBCUs. We know what's there. We know the math. We have the evidence. We have the data. What can we look forward to? The supermajority is broken in the repair of that. How will we engage the funding of our HBCUs? I know a deal was made to some degree, but I believe A&T over the last 30 years was shorted $2 billion when compared to NC State. So what type of initiatives can we invoke to repair the HBCU system of North Carolina, which is one of the strongest in the nation?
Yes, I think it's going to be a two-step issue, or three steps. So one, obviously, we have to break the supermajority. If we don't have any leverage at all. I mean, all of you know, no one ever negotiates with you unless you have leverage, unless they have to, unless you have something, to offer on the other side or some power. The only way we get that leverage is by bringing a supermajority. The second thing is it has to be on our governor's radar, has to be on that list of top priorities, the red line question before. And I think it will be, it can be, that just requires communicating with hopefully future Governor Stein, make sure we get the right governor in there, because obviously breaking the supermajority means nothing if we have Mark Robinson as the governor. The third thing is it's pushing for a better, and this is harder, a better, more transparent budget process. So our state budget, about roughly $30 billion budget. You would think that all during the year, there are all these committee meetings, hearings, opportunities for input, hearing from the public. But what happens is the day before we vote on it, that evening, it gets delivered to our office where most of us see it for the first time. So so when we get it, it's like this thick, and we have that night to read it and comb through it, understand what's in it, what's not, and then the disparities in it, and then organize around how we fight it or raise issues with it. And that's just the lack of transparency. The only way to deal with that is by upfront forcing them to the table by knowing that we're all going to hold and that it's an important priority for the governor to address the education issues, including the disparities. My first term, where we did have the big budget standoff, one of my colleagues, who's an A&T grad, raised that exact point on the floor in terms of our debate over the budget, and explicitly pointed out that funding disparity, and one of the senior members of the Republican leadership responded that he was trying to start a race war. That literally is what she said on the floor, and negotiating, just fixing the disparity. So we have to understand what we're dealing with, the mindset we're dealing with, and the only way to really combat that is going to have to be getting us more leverage and making sure it's on the red line list that we talked about earlier.
Okay, I have a question. When we were dealing with the situation where Ms. Cochran, changed and went to Raleigh and created the majority, Representative Carla Cunningham came to us and she shared with us, we had a discussion about that situation. And she shared with us, which was very clear to me, I'm pretty sure to both of us, that sometimes you have to negotiate with the other parties to get something that you want. So, at this point and at this point in time, it's not too much that you can ask for that they're gonna give into. And I'm speaking to you, Representative. Has there been an opportunity for you to trade off a vote or be a part of a committee that you've been able to work with the other side to obtain something that you have requested?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. The context I gave earlier matters, right? I'm not willing to trade off and vote for a budget that harms our public schools, that compromises on our core principles and values, that undermines our voting rights and things of that nature. I am, and I do work, you're in a minority, right? And if you want to get anything done, you need to have majority support. So I do work with Republicans on various bills, including bills that help students with disabilities. I worked on a bipartisan effort for a pilot program to make childcare more affordable, because that's a huge issue that we haven't touched on yet. It's called the Tri-Share program, where the state, the employer, and the employee help split the cost of childcare in North Carolina, and that actually was included into the budget, so that was something that I helped put forward. I helped get a bill through unanimously in the House, at least, to help our nonprofits across our state. And then sometimes you have to work with the other side, especially in a minority and in the super minority, to stop certain things. So my first term, every year there's a farm bill that comes through, and they put me on the agriculture committee, which I found interesting to put a lawyer from Charlotte on the agriculture committee. But being on that committee, I got to dig into the farm bill, which that year was going to amend the definition of agritourism. So agritourism is exempt from local input zoning laws. So the county and the city didn't have any ability to regulate agritourism. And one of the changes they were going to put in the farm bill was to make operating a gun range, like a shooting range, as part of agritourism. So in other words, you would be able to open a firing range If it's on a farm, it would be agritourism, and a county would have no ability at all to be able to regulate and say, actually, we don't think it's a good idea to have this fire range business next to these areas. And for Mecklenburg County, that was a huge concern for me, because when I first moved to Charlotte, I used to live in the university area, off the Back Creek Church Road. There's a farm like right there, at least there was when I lived there, that was surrounded by neighborhoods. So in Charlotte, when we have some of these farms that are in close proximity to neighborhoods, if that amendment had gone through, that farm could have opened up a gun range, a firing range, and the county would have no ability to do anything about it, according to this farm bill. So I was able to talk with my Democratic colleagues and some Republican colleagues concerned about this to get that removed or get it qualified in committee, so that it would exclude more urban areas that have where those farms are in close proximity to neighborhoods versus, your more rural areas where the farm is isolated, where it may not be as much of an issue. So the Republicans then took that amendment out and put that fire range provision back in, so then it was coming to the floor. So now you have a situation where if I want to get it out and protect people in Mecklenburg County, I can make a big fuss about it on the floor, but I know if I do that, being a Democrat from Charlotte, that's talking about guns, that's gonna draw up the partisanship line and walls, and it's just gonna go nowhere. So I drafted the amendment to fix it. I went to one of my senior Republican colleagues from Davie County, who was concerned about this because she had a lot of horse farms in her area, and I had her run the amendment, and she got it fixed and taken out of that bill so we can protect it. And the point is, you have to be able to work across the aisle and figure out ways to do things, and we do that. The key is, I will never do that, and I think nobody from our delegation, I'll tell you, from our caucus would do that in a way that would betray our core values, like looking after our children, protecting bodily autonomy, and healthcare access for North Carolina.
My question is about the public school voucher situation. Who's policing that money? Where is that money going, and do we know how it's happening? Is this, are these vouchers going to, is it a pay for play, basically?
So the way that the voucher money follows the child. So, so essentially, if a child goes to one of these private schools that accepts vouchers, and not all of them do, I think there was a study that the top 30 private schools in the state do not accept them, partly because there is no income cap on them, so anybody can get one. So it follows the child, and it is in amounts from $7,000 to $3,000 depending on your income. So it's really basically supplementing the tuition. So when the child goes to the private school that accepts a voucher, the voucher money follows that child. Now, if the child leaves the private school for that year, the voucher money stays with the school. Wow. So if your child leaves the school for any reason, and we all know that private schools can expel children, if that money does not go back to the public schools until the following year. So there's a lot of benefits to accepting these vouchers for those schools.
That's kind of my point. Who's running the private schools that are getting the money?
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem with the voucher program. There is not, to Nicole's point, there's not a watchdog, there aren't standards put in place, they're not subject to the same kind of standards and quality control. So you can have, state taxpayer dollars funding education that's not really education, it's teaching kids without standards, unlicensed teachers, the whole thing. So there's not really that control. That's one of the huge problems with the bill. It's not just that it's siphoning money from public schools, it's just bad stewardship of your tax dollars that are going to fund programs. We have no quality control over what happens in those schools. So that's a huge problem. And then also to Nicole's point, most of the existing established many of the existing established and respected private schools are not going to accept and don't accept vouchers. I mean, these schools don't need to, they have huge waiting lists. Their tuition costs dwarf the amount of money that you would get from a private school voucher. So what you would expect to see happen is a bunch of new institutions, startups, that we don't have any ability to actually guarantee that our taxpayer dollars are actually going to quality education, and to Nicole's point, that could discriminate against our kids, that have no requirements to accept kids, to provide special education for kids who need it, and other support mechanisms.
All right, we have Ms. Edwards-Walker. And then we have a question from Faith. Ms. Ivory, then Ms. Edwards-Walker, and then Faith.
Well, mine has been answered. I was following up on what Laura said. And basically, I know that you have to work across, with Democrats have to work with the other parties in order to get things done. So I understand that and I appreciate that. There's a difference in doing that and selling your soul. And that's what Trish did, So I don't have any problems with you guys negotiating with each other. So you do for me, I do for you, tit for tat. But selling your soul is a whole different story.
All right, I'm gonna go Faith Triggs.
Thank you both for being here. Good morning. From a political and a legislative perspective for both of you, looking at the next 5 to 10 years, what keeps you up at night? Like what really worries you that we don't know?
Three things. One, we've talked about a lot, which is public education. It is a huge crisis right now that we're not investing in our children, and we're not giving them the education they need. Right now, our state, again, is one of the fastest growing states. We are a great environment where people want to come and locate, and that's really reaping the benefits of the investments that a previous generation made in our education system, our public university system, and our community college system. That's really what makes our state competitive. The number one thing you'll hear from anyone trying to relocate or bring a business to a state is they want an educated, talented workforce. You can't get that without your education investment. That's one thing. Then you talk about the opportunities and what we owe our children. As a father with kids growing up in our state, we're doing them a disservice by not investing in their education. So education is one. Two, we touched on earlier, Nicole mentioned it, voting rights. And I think she summed it up perfectly, that gerrymandering is voter suppression. And this links back to the court conversation we had earlier. Our Supreme Court held that when the legislature gerrymanders districts, that when it does it for political reasons, that is violating your equal protection under our Constitution. It's denying you your right to vote because it weakens and dilutes your voting power, because the state is trying to weaken its accountability. So if the state doesn't like how you vote, it can draw districts that make your vote not matter. The Supreme Court held that violated the Constitution. Well, then what happened? We had partisan judicial races. The Supreme Court flipped, and months later, overturned that decision and said, no, actually, you can gerrymander districts on political grounds. So then they redrew the districts again, without this time trying to pretend that there was any kind of fairness in the districts. So this is my fourth election, my fourth different district running in, because they keep redrawing the districts to hold on to power. If you look at the state of North Carolina, we're a purple state. We're roughly a third between Democrats, unaffiliated, and Republicans. Yet our legislative policies do not reflect that reality, because they're protected from any kind of accountability, because they keep drawing the districts to lock themselves into power. That's a huge problem for a functioning democracy. So that's point number two. Point number three, I mentioned a little bit earlier or alluded to it, and that's our financial strength and solvency as a state. I told you that, we had $224 million less tax revenue this year than we did last year, despite the fact that we're a fast-growing state. You don't have to, be an economist to know that you have many, many more people moving to the state, you're taking in less money, it's going to become a problem at some point. So we're required to balance a budget, but we're only required to balance it on a 2-year basis. So what they do is they put in these revenue reductions that are 5, 10 years out. So you'll see the impact of that coming up soon. And so it looks like a balanced budget, and it can talk about a surplus when in fact we're actually bringing in less money. So what I'm concerned about is that we're not really aware of where we're headed from a financial basis while our revenues are falling, our population is growing, and we're shifting that funding burden down to the counties, which again is making your property taxes more expensive. So those are the 3 things in the next 5 to 10 years that I'm concerned about.
And now I'm really concerned too. I want to just kind of piggyback a little bit on some of the things that Representative Lofton spoke about.
We're running out of time.
Okay, then I won't piggyback. I'll just quickly say 2 things. One is the gerrymandering. I think one of the reasons why we're having a hard time getting out the vote in certain neighborhoods is because we don't have a lot of competitive races at the down ballot. So that, when I say it's voter suppression, that's exactly the intent, and it's working. So I thank you for the work you're doing, because it is really important. The other thing I will just say is I've spent the last week and a half at the polls listening to people, and the other thing that keeps me up at night is just the anger and the hatred and the lies that are being told to stoke that. And it really is difficult for me to understand how we come back from people who truly believe that other people, other North Carolinians, are their enemies, are trying to take things away from them, are trying to cheat and lie. So that is something, I think it's a nationwide problem, but I've just seen it in my district at the real local level, and that scares me.
All right, Jay Hill, then we got Ms. Jackie.
Hey Brandon, hey Nicole, thank you so much for being here today. Listen, I've been here coming over the past couple of weeks, and I keep hearing the same thing. They are gerrymandering.
You need to ask your question.
My question is, why does the Democrats, why do Democrats let Republicans do certain things and then complain about it? Like, if you know they're gonna do, redistricting, like, why do we just sit there and allow them to do those things and then
Okay, you
complain
asked your
about
question.
it?
Why do we let them do that?
Yeah, well,
They have to vote.
we don't have the power to stop them because we're in a super minority. So rather than just be silent about it, I think people need to be aware about why it matters and how it's impacting you, that you have people in charge of your government who are working hard to make your vote not matter. And I think it's our duty to make you aware of that. I don't have the votes to stop them from doing that. This is something that we've raised during the 2020 election. The reason why we kept saying the 2020 election was critical. It's a lesson we learned in 2010 when everyone was still celebrating getting President Obama elected, and then we lost all these state legislatures. That's when they locked themselves into power. So we knew 2020.
Okay. I'm sorry, that's the minutes up.
Yes. But that's
You already answered, they don't have to vote.
Keep talking, that's good.
Next question.
Ms. Edwards Walton.
Give it to Jackie.
I wanted to ask you, Representative, you mentioned something around strengthening nonprofits.
Yes.
And the folk who actually, fill those gaps in need.
Yeah, so I worked with the nonprofit Association of North Carolina and some Republicans to get a bill through the House. It's passed through the House unanimously each of my terms, but it hasn't moved in the Senate. So this past time, I took my name off the top position and put a Republican name on the top position in the hope that that would help it move forward, and came closer. So we're going to continue. If I have to take my name off it completely to help it move through, then I will do that. But the whole point of it is It basically cleans up our Organization Act, gives more flexibility to nonprofits so that they can grow, merge with other nonprofits, and as well as lowering their solicitation requirements there.
So is that the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits?
Yes, I think that's there. So David Heinen is the good guy.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do we have any more questions from the audience? If not, we will allow closing statements, and then we will go into announcements.
I just want to thank you all so much. This has been really interesting and fun, and it is actually very rare that candidates have an opportunity to just, engage in these conversations. So I think that we have talked about a lot of things, and we know the problems are real, and that this election is going to make such a difference in what our future looks like, not just the next 2 years, not the next 4 years, but the future of North Carolina. And so we just have to look at what is our vision for the future and what is that going to contain. I am working very hard to break that supermajority to answer these questions. Why can't we do more? We can't do more until we break that supermajority. And that's just the first step, but until we do that, we can't really bring to light all of these ideas that we have to make things better. So thank you for showing up this morning, for all you do with your forums, and for really, contributing to what democracy really is. It's kind of cool to see in action. I'm out at the polls, come out, just watch people wait in line, have conversations, voting. It's a beautiful thing, and we're lucky to be able to do it. So thanks so much.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for their time this morning and for the thoughtful questions and discussion. I guess I would say we're in a very interesting time right now. I think many of us in this room know that certain things that have been taken for granted can no longer be taken for granted, and we need to be mindful of not just who's at the top of the ticket, but the political climate that we're in. What Nicole mentioned is a real thing right now, where I had someone at the polls the other day tell me that they love gerrymandering and essentially thought it was her prerogative to prevent and heard other people reflect this sentiment. They're tired of people who they deem, whose opinions they don't agree with, having influence. So we're in a situation where we really do have to protect our democratic values. I think it starts with November 5th, with winning on November 5th and making sure we're protecting our democracy, but the work actually is going to get even more important after that. We know what happened when President Obama won in 2008 and how the Senate made it its mission to stop everything he was going to do. So we know that winning the election is step one. We're going to have to keep organizing and working to hold the legislative branch accountable, both at the national and at the state level. And it's going to be a 10-year project to get us where we need to go in order to turn our state around and our nation. But it's critical that we do not go back and we stand up for our democracy and our rights. So I appreciate all of you guys being here this morning and look forward to working with you moving forward.
Round of applause for Mr. Lofton this evening. And now we will take announcements from the audience. We have Jay Hill.
Tomorrow, the Power Mixer is back, 5:30 to 8:30 p.m., addressing social capital here in Charlotte. You can RSVP for free at thepowermixerclt.com. Thank you.
It's a really good time, too.
Thank you all again. I want to announce that we will be having a canvassing for HBCU grad, Howard University grad, Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. It's going to be the neighborhood stroll Saturday, November 2nd from 10 to 12 or from 12 to 2. And HBCU students will be strolling to the polls. You can register by scanning the QR code or calling the number that will be on the Sarah Stevenson Tuesday Forum website.
Good morning, voters. I know the majority of y'all have voted, but I still got some yard signs for Kamala Harris. So
So please, if you can, get them out my car. I'm tired of riding around that road. They have driven and rode more than I have. So if you all still need to sign, just because you vote, they don't mean you still can't influence other people to vote just because you went and vote. So, you know, please come out there to my car. Take as many as you need, because I got plenty more. I don't know why the Democratic Party gave me all of those, but that AAC. But anyway, please, come and get you a yard sign, or two. You can take 3 or 4, because I got more. Okay.
I'd like to announce that Goodwill on Wilkerson Boulevard, this is their first year with an early voting site. They have not had any lines. That's not so awesome. No. We haven't had any lines, and it is a beautiful site. It has a restaurant on the other side. It's beautiful. They've committed to having it next year, but folk are not coming except those from the airport, which is great for them, but other folk are not coming. Please, however you do your social media, please help us.
All right, Ms. Darnell.
I'm working early voting at Tucker's Betty Ray Center. We have had lines and we've had a pretty good turnout. And I'm just going to share this. When I'm helping in early voting, I'm certainly nonpartisan and I can't influence anyone. But when the people come in to vote and they come with the materials that they receive, they get those materials when they're out in the parking lot. They come in, many of them have not had a chance to really look at the comprehensive information that's on there. I don't know if in the polling places where you are, they may give you time to share some specifics and details that's on that information, because when they come in, they just kind of draw a blank. I'm also concerned that, real quick, I don't know ethnicity, I can just go by what I see. Maybe Vietnamese, maybe Asians, as they are voting and they need assistance, they come to vote for one thing. Everything else, they just basically go next, next, next. There has to be some way that you all, and I'm not saying you haven't done it, there must be an international connection that will allow politicians to go into those communities and establish, and you have an answer for that, because many are non-speaking English, so they come in and basically, if they can see the name of the president that they want to vote for, that's it for them, and they're done. So that's my concern.
I'm sorry.
Can I just respond? I will, I promise. We do have a group like that. We're trying to get out the word. It's
The International Minority Coalition led by William Fleming. We have meetings once on the 3rd Sunday at Club Now.
All right, Shay. For Wednesday? No? Okay. All right.
Actually, I'll make it up because it'll probably come from. We are making lots of efforts out there. A lot of people in the community doing things to bring out the vote. I encourage everyone to follow Mo Drayton. She's got a lot of different events happening over and over again. So check her out on social media. As Winston mentioned, I think there's something in the works that everyone will really enjoy, and that'll come out through her site.
It's also going to be a rally today, a Get Out the Vote rally at Johnson C. Smith at 4 o'clock. And following that, at 4:30, they're going to do a walk, a march to the poll. Yeah, and so that's going to be great. It's going to be food trucks and all that out there at 4 o'clock at Johnson C. Smith on the block.
Did I announce, did I thank you guys?
Last week, I don't know if I did or not, but if not, it never hurts to thank you again. For the Carlinia Ivory Canty, I forgot my last name, scholarship at Johnson C. Smith last week, for the first day, we raised towards the $1 million, $400,000. So thank you for anyone who contributed, and it's still, you can contribute, but it will go to a student for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, and we will start that process for the upcoming year. One of the things that I do want to see us talk about after the election, we keep talking about private schools, charter schools, and public schools. I want us to talk about, instead of saying it's because of charter schools or public schools, charter schools or private schools, how we can all work together to better public schools rather than compete against each other. Because people should have the right to send their child where they want, but how can we enhance public schools?
Is that, oh, Mr. Combs, all right, close it out, Mr. Combs, we gotta hurry.
You didn't want me to make this announcement.
Oh, no, I don't. I know what's coming. I know what's coming. All right, go ahead, hurry up.
There's a new sheriff in town, and it's at Johnson C. Smith University, which is now a nationally ranked Division II football power with an 8-0 record.
Yes.
We will go to Fayetteville State this weekend to play the Broncos with a great chance of being able to run the table by defeating them in the last game on the following Saturday against our rival Livingstone College. So if you have not gone to see the Golden Bulls play, do so. If you have not told anybody else about them, do so. But do understand, we for real.
They did beat my Winston-Salem State University Rams last Saturday. However, I will, no, not bad at all. Literally 8 points. But beyond that, support local. This is our Charlotte. This is Charlotte's institution. Go to games, support, be there. I will put my pettiness aside to support JCSU in this circumstance. But thank you everybody for another Tuesday morning forum. Thank you guys for giving us so much great information. I hope to see you all next week where our guests will be nobody, because it is election day. We close. Go vote if you have not. See you in 2 weeks.
Or work the polls. We actually
Or work
election protection, so y'all
work the poll sounds crazy out of context, but we're voting happens. Oh, wait a minute. Talking about college tuition and working poll, like, wait a minute.
Thank you.